Greetings, y'all. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. What's going on? Early chatters are in. Welcome, everyone. Urban Hermit, Had Walmer, Poppy Davis. What's up, Per Larson? Hello from Denmark. Rich Diana, Kuro Hikes, Snake 1974. We are live on Rockfin as well. Please join me on Rockfin, ROKFIN.com. Urban Hermit is there. He says, here we go. But greetings, glad to see you all here. Thank you. Thank you for being here every day. Let's jump into it. So Muzza yesterday, Muzza was saying that he couldn't post links actually for the last couple days. I don't know if Muzza is here. Maybe I should wait for this until he gets here. But anyways, I tried to do some research on this, and I found people saying that moderators could not post links anymore. So, and this seems to be a site-wide, there seems to be a lot of people having the same issue. So, of course, you know, not to jump straight into paranoia or conspiracy theory, but it seems to be probably generated in order to keep people from promoting themselves. You know, it's just a little tamp down on the independent media world. Because I'm guessing, but I'm probably right in the fact that I'm sure on larger sites or more mainstream sites, I'm sure the moderators are fully able and capable of posting links. So that's what's going on. Muzza, you know, if you see this, it just seems to be an issue. Let's go into, so I had some good comments. I don't know which one I'm going to start with first. Well, let's start with Marty McCorkle, since Marty McCorkle, well, he just gave me a link basically, and he was paraphrasing or giving me the bullet points of an article entitled Megadrought Invades the West. The drought in 9 U.S. states from Oregon and Montana down through California to New Mexico lasted from 2000 to 2018. So let's go straight to the article, which is on energyskeptic.com, Peak Energy and Resources, Climate Change, and the Preservation of Knowledge. So this is titled Megadrought Invades the West from December 14th, 2020. Preface: Mother Nature has had enough and is biting us back. Climate change will increase the chance of a Southwest megadrought that lasts longer than those in the past. And as I mentioned the other day, you know, megadrought it's not that megadroughts haven't happened before. They are a historical phenomenon and a climate phenomenon. However, with the advent of climate change, megadroughts are going to be, again, much more frequent, much more long-lasting. They're going to start to become a feature and not a bug. Let's see. The drought in 9 U.S. states from Oregon and Montana down through California to New Mexico lasted from 2000 to 2018 and was among the most severe to strike the region in the last 1,200 years, a new study finds. In the past, megadroughts lasted from 50 to 90 years. And the hotter temperatures of today could make this and future droughts even worse. The tree ring-based reconstructions of past climate from 1,586 sites in the western U.S. reveal just one drier 19-year period. A powerful megadrought from 1575 to 1593 that may have contributed to the abandonment of the Anasazi from their settlements in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Plus, caused a faster, more devastating spread of disease brought by Spanish conquistadors. Oh, what a fun time that was, I'm sure, for the indigenous of North America. 16th century megadrought coincided with a powerful La Nina event. And in the last 2 decades, there have been more La Nina than El Nino years. But we can't blame it entirely on La Nina. It's up to half due to climate change and rising temperatures. Hot air holds moisture, which it absorbs from trees, shrubs, and the ground, drying them out. It also reduces snowpack and river flows and increases wildfire seasons. Climate change makes the difference between a manageable drought and severe consequences, and makes it more likely this megadrought will continue. So much groundwater was used to cope that the region's safety net is mostly gone. There's a 50% chance Lake Mead will dry up by 2050, and a 10% chance it will dry up by 2021. Lake Mead is very low, and there's a 10% chance it will dry up by 2021. I was just going to say, there's actually probably a higher likelihood that it dries up much earlier than 2050. They're saying 10% by next year, so that's a pretty large likelihood. If this turns into a long megadrought, it would be catastrophic for California's 40 million people, farm production cut in half, and ecosystems suffer the most of all. And the population of the Southwest continues to grow exponentially. Also, from NASA, a megadrought will grip U.S. in the coming decades, NASA researchers say. Researchers from NASA and Cornell and Columbia universities warned of an 80% chance of megadroughts lasting up to 40 years in the Southwest and Central USA. Well, my guess is that we haven't seen anything yet. Ain't seen nothing yet. Let's move on. I liked this tweet from Duncan McLaren because I'm not really a fan of carbon offsets or carbon credits. I think it's mostly just another Ponzi scheme, or just another, I kind of don't understand why so many people support carbon credits, but it seems like just a way of doing the fancy accounting to make it seem like you're doing something about climate change, or make it seem like you're somehow lowering your emissions or your carbon footprint, and not so much. So let's go into this article from Vox. Can you really negate your carbon emissions? Carbon offsets explained. So let's go a little bit deeper into this. Offsets have become a wildly popular and controversial way to fight climate change. This is from February 27th, 2020. Just before the pandemic swept through our consciousness, or in the early days of the pandemic, this odd melange of companies. So let's go back. Amazon, JetBlue, Delta Airlines, Elton John, Dave Matthews Band, Justin Trudeau, Austin, Texas, Norway, Nestle, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, and NASCAR. What do they have in common? This odd melange of companies, celebrities, cities, countries, and organizations have all made commitments to curb their contributions to climate change, if not eliminate them entirely. And they have one tactic in common: buying carbon offsets. Oh. How does that work? For companies like Amazon and Delta aiming to be carbon neutral, offsets help provide the net in their net zero emissions goals. Oh, I see. So we just move some emissions from over here to over here, over there, over here. We're going to sell these emissions over here. We made some emissions. We're going to sell them over here. Some people are going to buy our emissions and tell people that they're not emitting anything. And then presto, nothing up my sleeve. At least no carbon emissions anyways. For companies like Amazon and Delta aiming to be carbon neutral, offsets help provide the net in their net zero emissions goals. And together these buyers are fueling a multi-billion-dollar market for one of the more popular and more controversial tactics to limit greenhouse gases. Following a wave of global youth climate strikes, an alarming United Nations report showing that the best case scenario for climate change is slipping out of reach, and a wave of devastating climate-linked disasters from Brazil to Australia, there's been a spike in interest in carbon offsets. Of course there has. In particular, a growing number of people, fueled by peer pressure and shame, are reckoning with their emissions from air travel. In late 2019, there was over 700% increase in businesses, organizations, and individuals taking action using our travel offset tool, said Jody Manning, Director of Marketing at Cool Effect, a nonprofit that sells carbon offsets and invites travelers to wipe away the baggage of pollution. Wow, it's just that simple. Wipe away the baggage and wipe it clean out of your mind. The booming market for offsets falls into two broad categories: voluntary and compliance. Voluntary offsets are the ones people and companies buy at their own discretion. Compliance offsets are used to meet legally binding caps on carbon in schemes like the European Union's emissions trading system. Again, all of this falls under the category of virtue signaling, right? All of this falls under the category of verbiage and language. We're going green, we're going net zero, net zero, net zero, net zero. All this is signaling that you're doing something while kind of not really doing something, and that's the whole idea of it. According to the Ecosystem Marketplace, the market for voluntary offsets came close to $300 million and traded almost 100 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2018. The latest year for which data is available, estimates of the size of the global carbon compliance offset market range between 40 billion and 120 billion. That's a lot of bees. And the markets are likely to grow even more. Spurred by demand from customers and pressure from their own employees, more than 170 companies to date have pledged to become carbon neutral by the middle of the century, if not sooner. These private behemoths join 77 countries, the United Kingdom, the Marshall Islands, Costa Rica, Sweden, and more than 100 cities that have set similar climate goals. Meeting these ambitious targets will eventually require decarbonizing completely, which is tougher for some countries and companies than others. Those that currently depend on oil sales, natural gas heating, or coal-fired furnaces can nonetheless start making progress right away through buying offsets. With a carbon offset, a business, a government, or an individual can pay someone else to cut or remove a given quantity of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. That can take the form of buying cleaner burning cook stoves, Do you see the problem with that immediately? Cleaner burning cook stoves in developing countries that reduce deforestation for firewood. I mean, there is an element of positivity in that, but there's also the buying part and the cleaner burning cook stoves part. How carbon neutral is that whole thing right there? But we'll give it the benefit of the doubt for right now. Or financing a wind turbine generator, again, to displace fossil fuels on the power grid. Again, sounds really great, but there's the financing part. That money part includes an exchange of some, or some kind of emissions involved in that. And also the wind turbine generator involves some emissions as well. Critically, but as long as it looks good on paper, that's the point. Critically, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from these projects counts towards the balance of the person or government buying the offset rather than people installing the project or the place where it's built. What's more, buying offsets is something anyone can do if they have the money. So there you go. And unlike policies like a carbon tax, an offset is directly connected to a specific quantity of greenhouse gas emissions, at least on paper. At least on paper being the key wording there. These are wind turbines in Western India, by the way. Carbon offset projects have a long history of over-promising and under-delivering, threatening fragile progress on climate change. Some of the more established offset programs like the United Nations REDD program, REDD Plus, REDD Plus program, or the Kyoto Protocol's Clean Development Mechanism, have had a poor track record of meaningful reductions in emissions. Therein lies the rub. Disagreements about rules around offsets also continue to derail international climate change negotiations. So there's a lot of well-deserved skepticism around them, right? And how long have these programs been going on? How long have these entities, organizations been promising a reduction in emissions? How long, I ask you, how long? But advocates say that the enormous potential of offsets to combat climate change, protect nature, and route money to the parts of the planet that need it the most shows they need to be part of the portfolio of solutions to limit warming. Okay. So it's all about the potential. So it's enormous potential, even though there's a lot of skepticism and a history of over-promising and under-delivery. Yet, boy, oh boy, look at that potential. The potential to continue over-promising and under-delivering. The potential to continue generating some well-deserved skepticism. Anyways. Here are five of the most important things to know. One, what is a carbon offset? This is going to be long, guys, so I'm not going to read the entire thing. I'm just going to kind of get to the core of what they're saying as quickly as I possibly can. At its core, an offset is an accounting mechanism. It's a way of balancing the scales on pollution. Offset schemes have been used successfully in the past to solve other environmental problems like nitrogen oxide air pollution that contributes to acid rain. Interesting that they considered that solved. But to reduce local air pollution, you need to have your offset in the vicinity of the pollution source, like a coal power plant. Otherwise, the offset won't do anything to improve air quality. That's not the case for human-produced greenhouse gas emissions that are changing the climate. Since climate change is a global problem, it doesn't matter where you reduce emissions, says Anya Kolmus, a policy analyst in Zurich who studies emissions trading. You can reduce emissions anywhere you want, and if you have a limited amount of money at your disposal, it makes sense to reduce emissions where it's cheapest and easiest to do them. Say, for example, that a steel mill wants to reduce its emissions, a smart idea because 5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from iron and steel production. but rather waiting for years for all the financing and infrastructure to fall into place to install new zero emissions hardware or technology. The steel mill could start mitigating its emissions now by buying offsets. That would take the form of buying credits from a broker who in turn channels money to people restoring a degraded coastal mangrove forest in Indonesia, for example. An acre of mangrove trees can store 5 to 10 times as much carbon as an acre of rainforest, and restoring huge swaths of these regions is much cheaper than upgrading industrial facilities. The steel mill would then measure its greenhouse gas footprint and purchase an offset or credit for shares of a mangrove conservation project that would capture or reduce an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. Offsets are typically packaged in discrete units sold discrete, otherwise known as secret, sold by a price per metric ton of carbon dioxide reduced. Okay, so that sounds all wonderful and stuff, but the steel mill is still polluting in the meantime. Gases going out, some gases being drawn from the air. 2, how do you make a good carbon offset? There are 4 key ideas and principles to consider to make a reliable offset. Additionality. Essentially, additionality is counterfactual. Does buying this specific offset lead to a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that would not have happened otherwise? If you pay someone who is already building a wind farm to displace a coal power plant, for instance, you may be helping them build a better business case for the project, but that chunk of renewable energy would have to be built without your input anyway. That means your purchase didn't result in any additional reductions in greenhouse gases. On the other hand, if someone is about to clear a section of rainforest and you pay them not to, you have reduced the greenhouse gas emissions associated with deforestation. Permanence. To limit climate change, greenhouse gas emissions have to be kept out of the air pretty much forever. And that may not be the case with some offset projects. Recently, tree planting has received a lot more attention. Even President Trump, during his State of the Union address, without mentioning climate change directly, highlighted that the U.S. will join an initiative to plant 1 trillion trees around the world, in part to soak up carbon dioxide. The idea is that trees and other plants take in carbon dioxide from the air as they grow and store it in their biomass. But as we've seen recently with bushfires in Australia and fires in unhealthy parts of the rainforest in Brazil, the carbon stored in these forests can suddenly get pumped back into the air. Whoa. That means trees can be a risky bet for permanent carbon storage. And then there's the old deforestation thing. Some companies and scientists are investigating. They're looking into it. Permanent geological storage of carbon dioxide, like sequestering carbon dioxide from power plants underground or turning it into rock. I wonder how much carbon dioxide it takes to turn carbon dioxide into a rock. Anybody? 3, double counting. When someone purchases an offset, the underlying emissions reduction shouldn't be sold again or left on someone else's balance sheet. This principle is especially important for international offsets. You have to make sure you have an exclusive claim to your emissions reduction, said Derek Brokoff, a senior scientist at Stockholm Environment Institute. It sounds simple, but in practice it's proven to be a thorny problem. Oh, it's so thorny. In December, negotiators from around the world gathered in Madrid, Spain to discuss how to implement the Paris Climate Agreement. What? In December, that was last year. When was the Paris Climate Agreement concocted? Agreed to? They were discussing how to implement it in 2019. Anyways, at the meeting known as the COP25, they tried for days to hammer out an accord. Brazil, in particular, wanted more leeway in counting rainforest preservation towards its own targets, while still selling offsets to other countries. So I think what they're saying is they wanted to double dip a little bit. 4, leakage. Oh, leakage. There's that word, sticky, little sticky. Don't get that leakage on you. Environmental rules can sometimes drive people to avoid them. For instance, if a country or a state implements a cap and trade scheme for greenhouse gas emissions, there is a chance that the sources of those emissions, factories, power plants, farms, would relocate to a place without a cap. Oh. Right. Just simply, well, and that's already been happening, right? I mean, that's a process that's been underway for 30 plus years. Companies moving out of the country, their home country, where there might be rules and regulations in place that are very strict and cause them to spend a lot of money enforcing those rules and regulations, and paying their workers a living wage, where they can just move to another country where there are very little rules and regulations, and you can pay people dirt wages. You can pay poor people peanuts in order to make your goods and make your goods for cheaper and avoid those pesky regulations. Anyways, let's go back to. So we're going down the list still. 3, is there more to offsets than forest restoration projects? Right now, some of the most popular offsets involve nature-based solutions. Well, that's good. That is good. Actually, we're going to go with a ding on that, at least. Like cool affects wetland and forest restoration projects, but carbon dioxide isn't the only greenhouse gas, and forests aren't the only way to soak them up. In terms of the range of activities that can produce carbon offsets, some of the best are actually industrial gas destruction projects. This is a situation where you're taking like a waste gas from some industrial process, whether it's HFCs or in some cases N2O from, let's say, nitric acid production or other similar kinds of activities where there's really no other revenue stream. Gases like HFCs and N2O are potent heat trappers in the atmosphere, much more powerful than carbon dioxide, so reducing their emissions has a huge impact on mitigating climate change. Their impacts on the climate are quantified as global warming potential pegged to carbon dioxide. If carbon dioxide has a global warming potential of 1, methane is 30, and nitrous oxide is close to 300. Some of the tougher offsets to implement are those for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. It's a lot more difficult to prove additionality with such projects. The costs for renewable energy are dropping rapidly, and energy efficiency has an inherent economic incentive. Many of these efficiency upgrades and solar and wind installations would be going forward anyway without money from offsets. And don't, never mind the accounting of how many emissions it takes to actually make these things or put these things in place. But maybe they're counting those in the actual implementation of these technologies, right? The offset is built in, I suppose. In the future, offsets may come from sucking carbon dioxide straight from the air via technologies known as direct air capture. All right. 4, what are the problem with carbon offsets? Let's keep going. According to Colmus, the majority of offsets being sold by brokers, businesses, and governments don't deliver the emissions reductions they promise. Yeah, there are many more bad offsets than there are good offsets, she said. Wow. Pretty big admission there. Different offset programs have developed their own standards and best practices, but they've been difficult to uphold. One of the most prominent international offset systems in the United States, Red Plus program, is the United Nations Red Plus program, first formed in 2005. That's 15 years ago. It's aimed at reducing emissions associated with deforestation and at restoring natural areas, helping wealthier countries stay within carbon caps by routing funding to developing countries where these forests are located. But as Lisa Song at ProPublica reported, Red Plus has struggled in places like the Amazon, as pressures to cut down the rainforest overwhelmed the payments being issued to protect it. Wow. With many purchasers left none the wiser. Wow. That meant that a major carbon sink was being degraded, and the associated emissions from the offset purchaser were continuing unabated, with little accountability on either side of the transaction. Wow. In case after case, I found that carbon credits hadn't offset the amount of pollution they were supposed to. Wow. Or they brought gains that were quickly reversed or that couldn't be accurately measured to begin with, Song wrote. Ultimately, the polluters got a guilt-free pass to keep emitting CO2. But the forest preservation that was supposed to balance the ledger either never came or didn't last. Some good news. Daniel Nepstad, an Amazon rainforest researcher and founder of the Earth Innovation Institute, said that there are solutions to these problems, and some are already being pursued. In particular, he said there's been a push to develop offsets beyond the scale of individual projects. We move to a much larger scale where the boundaries are an entire state, an entire province, an entire nation. He said that all gets more simple and robust at the big scales. By expanding the scale of an offset program to a wider jurisdiction, it can generate a larger quantity of emissions reductions than with an individual project. It also brings governments on board, adding accountability and enforcement. This is a critical element in getting large reductions in forest loss. Adding accountability and enforcement, despite the recent surge in deforestation in the Amazon, there is a recent surge, Brazil's government has actually slowed its rate of forest loss with government policies in recent decades, so over the last few decades. Between 2005 and 2014, deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon declined by 70%. However, in the last 5 years, obviously, it's on the rise. Again. Or maybe it's slowing at a much more, slowing at a lesser pace. Another problem is that offsets are cheap at the moment. If prices are too low, offsets don't generate enough pressure to get an individual or government or business to change their own carbon-intensive behavior. You get what you pay for, I guess, in every market, and in fact may simply grant them license to keep doing what they're doing. 5, can't we just offset our way out of climate change? In the hierarchy of climate action, the first and most effective option isn't almost always to reduce emissions. What? In other words, rather than buying offsets for your flight, see if you can avoid that flight entirely. Ding, ding, ding. Just don't do the action. Just reduce your emissions. Your own damn self. If you can, try and do it. Do it if it's and even if it's really uncomfortable, try and do it. That's why some environmentalists and activists criticize offset purchases as just greenwashing. Ding, ding, ding. Particularly when they come from fossil fuel companies like BP, ding, 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 which has committed to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Of course. And you're gonna make it there, BP. You're gonna make it one way or the other. If the environment collapses, or the economy collapses, or the oil industry collapses, You'll be getting to net zero very, very quickly. How will they reach net zero? Will it be through offsetting? When will they stop wasting billions on drilling for new oil and gas we can't burn? Said Charlie Cronick, oil advisor from Greenpeace UK, in a statement. What is the scale and schedule for the renewables investments they barely mention? And what are they going to do this decade when the battle to protect our climate will be won or lost? All of this, again, for some people, countries, and businesses not buying offsets would force them to reckon with their own emissions. Boom. Take more aggressive actions to reduce them. Boom. The option of buying offsets also creates a moral hazard where polluters can continue emitting greenhouse gases with abandon. This robs the world of precious time needed to get climate change under control. This is the point. This is the main point that I think should be driven home. I'm going to read these last two sentences again. The option of buying offsets creates a moral hazard where polluters can continue emitting greenhouse gases. So instead of changing your behavior, you know, Dave Matthews Band, if you're trying to buy our offsets in order to keep on touring, and you know, I'm a musician, and you know, everybody likes to go see music, and everybody, you know, blah blah blah. But you know, we have to be realistic about what it means. All kinds of industries, you know, creative and otherwise, even the ones that are real pretty to look at, you know, like being a musician or being a touring band, or making movies, right? All those things really damage the environment, right? If you're in a band, if you're in a really popular band and you're touring the world and you're bringing in thousands of people are coming to your gigs and filling stadiums and or large concert arenas, there is a ton of carbon emissions involved in all of that activity. So I don't know. Is the answer to buy offsets, or is the answer to curb that activity? Let's see. Let's read on. Many activists also think that offsets shift the burden of fighting climate change from the wealthy to the poor. Yeah, that's part of why the band Massive Attack, which had purchased offsets for its concerts and tours for decades, has become skeptical of them. Interesting. First, the concept of offsetting creates an illusion that high carbon activities enjoyed by wealthier individuals can continue by transferring the burden of action and sacrifice to others, generally those in the poorer nations in the Southern Hemisphere, wrote Massive Attack's Robert Del Naja in The Guardian. Ultimately, carbon offsetting transfers emissions from one place to another rather than reducing them. And ding, 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 that's the truth. All of it is an accounting trick, and so carbon offsetting is, for the most part, we'll just wrap it up as a big fat no. We need, you know, a rapid reduction in carbon emissions, you know. And that doesn't mean net zero. That just means straight up zero, or zeroing out, or lowering down to, you know, an extremely small percentage. You know, when they talk about the rich, the wealthy lowering their emissions by 97%, you know, that means actually lowering their emissions 97%, not offshoring those emissions, not accounting for those emissions in other ways. All right, checking in with my people on Rockfin, what's going on? Kevin Shanholzer says carbon offsets equals carbon allowance equals carbon totally legal. Regulation equals legalization. Exactly. Poppy Davis says unenforceable means undone. Exactly. All right. Big love to my people on Rockfin hanging out with me. Got 99 watching on the YouTubes, 48 likes. Please like up the video, guys. Osama says, Ginger Ninjas. California reggae band did an 80-date tour of California using no carbon by using modified bicycles to carry themselves and their gear. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Once at the show, the 5 bikes were used as generators, with the fans lining up to take turns powering the band's Class D amps and LED lighting rig. That's super cool. I like that. I love it. And there are other ways, to do this too. What if you, what if you played a gig at your house and asked people to just ride their bikes or walk to the gig? Played gigs for the neighborhood, right? I mean, it's cool doing tours. That's super awesome. Or there are other ways to do it, too. But I like that. I like that a lot. Irk1 says, how about bicycles with 25 pedalers, bus bikes, and people on roller skates skitching? Creative Experiment says, carbon offsets are for guilty vegans who drive Teslas. All too true. Yikes. And Kuro Hike says, it's not an argument so much about if offsets are effective. They are not. The argument is it okay to enslave people in other nations for cheddar biscuits, tennis shoes, and roll them back prices? Yes, too true. And the answer is no, it's not okay. The answer is not, it's not okay. Yes, Rich Diana, in the long run, we were just too damn successful. And that's why I'm saying, like, if let's say you're a fairly popular musician, but what if you were just hyper local? What if we have to just rethink the whole idea of being successful, or being a musician, or being an artist, or being somebody who makes clothes, or somebody who, we have to pretty much rethink our entire lives. Osama, what's up? Big love and respect to you. That's right. Poppy Davis, Ginger Ninja. Pow, pow, pow. All right, let's move on. But yeah, big problems with the offsets there. Am I right? Am I right? Yeah, more greenwashing, courtesy of the Biden administration. This tweeted by Kali. I can't even read this again without feeling sick. All this neoliberal growth rhetoric and nationalism between the lines, like this is MAGA 2.0 plus hopium combining in this impressive word salad. This is the Climate and Clean Energy Plan from Joe Biden. We'll just take a gander at this. Biden believes the Green New Deal is a crucial framework for meeting the climate challenges we face. It powerfully captures 2 basic truths. Let's see what these truths are, which are at the core of this plan. 1, the United States urgently needs to embrace greater ambition on an epic scale. Okay, that's true. To meet the scope of this challenge. And 2, our environment and our economy are completely and totally connected. Yes, that's true, because our economy involves destroying the environment. So if you want to save the environment, right? So let's just do a basic little, scale thing. Economy up, environment down. Environment up, economy down. It's just a super, super basic understanding of how that's going to have to work. If we can harness all of our energy and talents and unmatchable American innovation, we can turn this threat into an opportunity to revitalize the U.S. energy sector and boost growth economy-wide. We can create new industries that reinvigorate our manufacturing. Yeah, so this is total, neoliberalism and planet destruction wrapped in a bright green package. Reinvigorate our manufacturing and create high-quality middle-class jobs in cities and towns across the United States. We can lead America to become the world's clean energy superpower. That's all. That's really what you want to be, right? You want to be a superpower, but you want to do it using clean energy. Doesn't that make you feel a lot better, guys? All right. I feel better already. We're going to give them some green freedom. The world, that is. We can exploit our clean energy technology across the globe and create high-quality middle-class jobs here at home. Getting to a 100% clean energy economy is not only an obligation, it's an opportunity. We should fully adopt a clean energy future, not just for all of us today, but for our children and grandchildren, so their tomorrow is healthier, safer, and more just. Again, just. Again, the language, the messaging, the virtue signaling, more just, more equitable. When the reality is that's exactly what it's not going to be if they are allowed to do all the things they want to do, right? I'm not saying that I have a problem with equitability or equality or justness. I want the justness and the equality and equitability, but they're just signaling with the language that that's what they're trying to do, but they're not going to do it. Anyways, the Biden plan will ensure the U.S. achieves a 100% clean energy economy and reaches net zero emissions no later than 2050. All right, so very, very late. That's not fast enough, Joe Biden. And again, if it's all involving a bunch of super magic accounting, it's really not helping the environment or, building a stronger, more resilient nation. Yes. Rally the rest of the world to meet the threat of climate change. All right, well, we'll chalk that up on the positive side. Sure, let's rally the world. Stand up to the abuse of power by polluters who disproportionately harm communities of color and low-income communities. So here's the super virtue signaling language. Oh, yes, we're going to stop the abuse of power by polluters, but not the abuse of the United States towards low income and communities of color, right? So all this is a big fat virtue signal because we still want to be able to bomb brown people in other countries. We still want to be able to enslave people for cheddar biscuits and tennis shoes. And lithium, right? We still want to be able to do all of that stuff. We still want to be able to exploit the poor of the planet. But, this is, nice try, right? Oh, yes, this is great. We totally are behind this, right? Most people would read this and go yeah, how can you not be behind this? This is super great. Okay, yeah, well. But read between the lines, and you have to actually pay attention to all of these things that they say are going to happen and what actually happens. Blah blah boo boo. The Biden plan will ensure that communities across the country from Flint, Michigan, where Obama went and drank some. Can I get a glass of water? I don't usually do stunts like this, but can I get a glass of water? So. Let's see how quickly they clean up Flint, Michigan's water problem, to Harlan, Kentucky to the New Hampshire seacoast to have access to clean, safe drinking water. And he'll make sure the development of solutions is an inclusive, community-driven process. Oh, that sounds really great. That makes me feel so much better. Yeah, fulfill our obligation to workers and community who powered our industrial revolution and subsequent decades of economic growth. So again, this is a lot super bucket full of virtue signaling here, but okay, nice words, really nice words. I love the words. The language is really great. The question is, read between the lines and what is really going to be happening. We're not going to leave any workers or communities behind. But check this out. Let me just pop on over to what's happening in this latest stimulus bill, which everybody is, eventually going to agree on, Democrat and Republican alike. Let's pop on over to this. Let's see what they're doing for low-income people and communities of color, and right now in this stimulus bill, how a GOP stimulus measure could weaken protection for workers, minorities, and the disabled. Look, I understand that some Democrats are against this. Some people are pushing back against this. I understand this is not everybody's fault in the government, but they are eventually going to agree on this stuff. And Joe Biden is, key in reaching across the aisle and working with Republicans and trying to find a middle ground here. So we're going to allow a whole bunch of bullshit in order to make it look like something was done. The provision included in the corporate liability shield package would exempt businesses from tougher safety regulations and some civil rights enforcement. The corporate liability shield that Republicans have made a central part of stimulus negotiations includes little-known provisions that could weaken the ability of government authorities to enforce laws that protect workers and guarantee the civil rights of people of color and Americans with disabilities, say labor and civil rights advocates. I understand that they're saying the GOP is putting this forward, but if Democrats agree to this, they are just co-signing this bullshit. Just like when Democrats fast-tracked all of Trump's judicial appointments, you can rightly say, "Oh yeah, what an asshole, what a bastard." Look at these Republicans and what they're doing to the judicial system. But the Democrats are not fighting it on any level. They're like, "Oh, this sounds good. Yeah, well, they're co-signing the destruction of the judicial system or the packing of the courts with a whole bunch of like right-wing or corporate-friendly judges, right? That's the reality of what's happening. So you have to read between the lines. The measure would exempt businesses from tougher safety regulations if they are substantially following other, sometimes weaker government standards and guidance. The term substantially following is one of a handful of fuzzy legal phrases that occupational health experts say could effectively wipe out most workplace safety enforcement by the federal government and potentially invalidate more stringent regulations passed at the state level as well. The move in Congress is of particular concern to labor advocates, given that creating a uniform federal workplace safety standard for the pandemic is expected to be a priority for the Biden administration, right? So this is a concern for labor advocates, because supposedly this is supposed to be a priority for the Biden administration as it seeks to curb transmission of the coronavirus in workplaces. But is Joe Biden speaking out about this? Is the incoming Biden administration doing much about this? Or really raising concerns about this? Do you hear that? Are we seeing that? Have we seen that? This proposal strips all COVID-related worker safety protections away from workers, including protection from retaliation during the worst occupational health crisis in our lifetimes, right? So protections from retaliation from their employers. Said Deborah Berkowitz, a former Occupational Safety and Health Administration official now with the National Employment Law Project. This bill would undermine all efforts to mitigate the spread of COVID at work and back out into the public, and it will lead to more illness and death. Business lobbying groups such as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce say that the provision is important to help companies avoid unnecessary fines and regulation during the crisis. Oh, yes, deregulate. Let's deregulate because we can't be bothered with this. This is gonna hamper us during this pandemic. So we don't want to be held to account. The provision is tucked near the end of the coronavirus stimulus bill that has been scrutinized mostly for the way it seeks to protect companies from lawsuits filed by workers and consumers seeking to hold them accountable for the spread of infections. Whoa. And you know that this extends all the way to the pharmaceutical companies that are developing the vaccines, right? They have liability shields. They are protected from lawsuits in the development and in administering of these vaccines. Despite being billed as a bipartisan effort, Joe Manchin, Democrat, has signed off on a plan along with a group of Republicans. The text of the provision is mostly unchanged from the corporate liability bill released over the summer by Senate Republicans. Yeah, but they're signing off on it. They're like, yeah, we're good. We're good with this. Pelosi as well. Pelosi, Schumer, Manchin, all these people are like, yeah, go for it. The provision states that an employer shall not be subject to any enforcement proceeding or liability under the provision of a covered federal employment law if the employer meets a few conditions, such as following a standard from state, local, or federal government and exploring options to comply with such obligations. Yeah, this is super bad. to put it in layman's terms, super bad. Legal experts said the provision would effectively strip OSHA of its ability to enforce worker protections during the pandemic. Yeah. And do you think that these protections are going to come back after the pandemic is over? How quickly do you think these protections are going to come back? You let me know. In places where state-level OSHA regulations are stronger than the federal ones, such as Virginia and California, it could weaken attempts at enforcement as well. Let's go down here. Also, there's also another thing I want to cover. The bill also undercuts some federal enforcement of key civil rights laws, such as Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in public places such as offices, restaurants, schools, hotels, and movie theaters, limiting liability for any action taken by employers regarding the coronavirus. If employers believe there is a health-related risk that prevents them from modifying the policy, the bill also similarly limits enforcement of Title II of the Civil Rights Act, a bedrock provision. This is wild. A bedrock provision that prohibits racial, religious, and nationality-based discrimination in public accommodations such as hotels and lunch counters. What the MF is going on here? Black, Latino, and Native people, immigrants, women, seniors, people with disabilities, they've all been hardest hit by this pandemic. True. And Joe Biden was the first to figure this out. He told you first. The hardest hit by this pandemic, said Galen Burroughs, senior counsel at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a coalition of more than 200 civil rights organizations. They think our federal civil rights and worker protections are even more essential in this crisis to safeguard fairness, safety, and dignity in addition to the economic security. Jennifer Mathis, a director at the Bazelon Center for Mental Health Law, said easing up on businesses' disability rights compliance would have a devastating impact, particularly for people in institutionalized care. Immunizing those facilities from liability would leave residents who are at risk of dying due to basic failures to protect people, including failure to ensure there's PPE, failure to ensure adequate distancing, failure to have protocols to minimize staff moving across different units and different facilities and accelerating discharges. Those things would leave people with disabilities without any protection in this life and death situation, Mathis said. So let's see if they still haven't passed any of this. Let's see if it happens, but not surprisingly, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has been one of the most prominent supporters of the corporate liability measure. Of course. We'll see if this gets through or not. But yeah, keeping an eye on this stuff. Let's move on. Again, there's this new strain of coronavirus going on in the UK. And causing a lot of concern. Belgium and the Netherlands stop UK travel. Ireland brings in restrictions. Belgium, Italy, and Netherlands ban flights from UK over new COVID strain. Following the announcement, the Irish government has banned flights for the next 48 hours, commencing midnight, December 20th, 2020. Aer Lingus will not operate flights from the UK to the Republic of Ireland. Israel is barring entry to non-citizens from the UK. From the UK, Denmark, and South Africa. Wait, is there a new virus mutation in Denmark and South Africa as well? Wow. Bulgaria will suspend all flights to and from the UK. Germany has also announced travel suspension until January 31st from the UK. And as our good friend in the chats, Andy the Gardener, said, Christmas is canceled in the UK. That's what's going on? Sorry to hear that if you're into the Christmas thing. Aer Lingus is funny. Yeah, it is. I think so too. Are you into Aer Lingus? All right. I'm not 12. I'm not really 12, but I was 12 for a second there. Let's see. We still got a little more to cover, guys. Just a little more. Kevin Shanholter, new COVID mutation. Yes, it's all the rage. It's raging in the UK. Kevin Shanholter also says it'll get through the bill. I think he's talking about the bill is over 1,000 pages and Congress is not reading it. Right. Ding, ding, ding. Let's see. We've got a few more things here to cover, guys. Just a few. Oh, actually, there's kind of a big thing I want to cover. Well, two Trump items. Scary Trump item, super scary Trump item. Trump reportedly asked advisors about deploying military to overturn election. It's fairly large news item about Trump and General Flynn discussing the idea of martial law. I really don't think this is going to happen, and honestly, just on a personal level, I feel like this is that they're using this is a language kind of like news story / language thing about trying to kind of get it into people's minds, right? This has been the messaging thing, right? The whole messaging this year was about how there was going to be election chaos and all this stuff was going to happen, and there's going to be martial law and blah blah blah. They're still using this martial law language in the headlines. Do I think this is really going to happen? I mean, who knows? There's probably some chance that it might happen. I really kind of doubt it. I feel like it's more about the messaging than it is about the reality of Trump trying to enact martial law. But who knows? Who knows? Still a wild story, though, right? I mean, think about it. If you just kind of step back from the story and think about the reality of this, it sounds insane, right? You know, the general, or it sounds like, you know, it also sounds like something out of a movie like Dr. Strangelove, right? General Flynn in Trump's in the Oval Office. What do you think about martial law? Should we enact martial law to overturn the election? Trump's like, huh? What do you think? Sounds like a good idea. Anybody else for martial law? It sounds bizarre to me, but we'll see where that goes. That's a weird and frightening story, but also on another level, this is also very interesting. Trump calls for Americans to receive more money in direct payments. So this is something I talked about, I think, yesterday, the day before, as Congress may pass a package with $600 stimulus checks, which everybody is agreeing is bull crap. So Trump urged lawmakers to pass a stimulus bill, and he called for Americans to receive more money in direct payments. So, I mean, you know, he's in league or in line with Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders, who were like saying, hey, we need more money than this. But it looks like it's only going to be about $600. But he was saying it should be $1,200, and it could be, he was like, it should be $2,000 or at least $1,200. And apparently they blocked him from, you know, reportedly they talked him out of it because they feared it could disrupt negotiations between Democrats and Republicans. That is also kind of a weird idea, right? Oh, you're going to disrupt it. Oh, you're being disruptive, Trump. Okay. What about Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley? Are they being disruptive? Anybody else want to be disruptive while they're busy bending the American public over and giving them $600 for it? Anybody else want to be disruptive? I don't know. But anyways, I'm going to finish up this video with a little bit of the story about this new Russian hacking story that's out, which a lot of people are like, yeah, maybe, you know, not so much, not so fast, CIA, not so much on the Russian hacking again. Again, I feel like this is, until we know a little bit more about it, for the most part, I feel like this is this is a headline intended to, you know, rile up the Russiagators or rile up the Russian fearmongers, rile up the blue checks, rile up the blue MAGAs. I told you the Russians were coming. I told you. Anyways, this is really good article, courtesy of Caitlin Johnson from Consortium News. Washington Post, Russians are hacking our minds. Oh my God. Yeah. And this is exactly what they're doing. But they're not Russians. They're actually, the intelligence community has hacked the minds of the American people, and they've been really effective at this. I've been saying this. Many other people have been saying this. Caitlin Johnson is saying this in this article. You know, if you listen to CIA propaganda, CNN News, MSNBC News, your mind just might be hacked into believing that the Russians are coming. And so many are repeating this story. Anyways, so let's read this. Washington Post keeps hammering this narrative about powerful Russian mind hackers, as though Russia is the only nation with an existing propaganda campaign on the world stage, writes Caitlin Johnson. And this goes beyond just the Russians are coming. This goes to, you know, they've even said, like, well, if you know, Tulsi Gabbard is a tool of the Russians. If you any idea that they want to smear or bring down in people's minds, any idea that they want to thwart, they can just say that you're a useful idiot of Russian propaganda, or you've had your mind You've been swayed by Russian propaganda. You only think that because you've been swayed by the bots on Twitter about, using Russian propaganda. Blah, blah, blah. The Washington Post. Caitlin Johnson writes, the Washington Post has published another article warning its readers that the Russians are hacking our minds. This one authored by CNN's Fareed Zakaria. Again, if you step back and just think about this, the ridiculousness of this could also come from Dr. Strangelove as well. Russia hasn't just hacked our computer systems, it's hacked our minds. Blair's the ridiculous propagandistic headline for an article about the Russian model of propaganda, which rests on the principle that people get convinced when they hear the same message many times from a variety of sources, no matter how biased. Which is funny, since this is not the first time Washington Post itself has repeated this cartoonish narrative about Russian mind hackers. The problem is not just that Russia has hacked America's computer systems, it seems to have hacked our minds. This is Fareed Zakaria, a tweet from him, my latest column. So he actually wrote a whole column about how Russia is hacking our minds. So if you believe the wrong things, if you're talking about the wrong things on social media, it could be because your mind is hacked by Russia. Caitlin Johnson responds, Russia and other adversaries may not need to hack the election if they can hack something else, our minds. So she's also referring to this Washington Post. From the Washington Post, Democracy Dies in Darkness. And they're talking about perception hacking, quote unquote. Just 2 months ago, the Washington Post editorial board published an article titled, The U.S. may be safe from foreign interference in this election, but what about perception hacking? Which opens with the line, Russia and other adversaries may not need to hack the election if they can hack something else, our minds. The paranoid screed unironically argued that Russia is using its super powerful propaganda engine to make people paranoid and doubtful of U.S. electoral systems. Which could actually, so yes, if you think that the election system is somehow unsafe or fraudulent or open to hacking, well, then that could be a hack of your brain, which could actually have an adverse effect on the U.S. election. As though telling people their mental and perceptual faculties are being hacked by a hostile foreign enemy with the goal of influencing the election would not make them paranoid and doubtful of U.S. electoral systems. Zakaria's piece builds on this already established theme by parroting the still completely evidence-free claim that Russia was responsible for the far-reaching cyber intrusion into the IT company SolarWinds. This is the story about election hacking, the one that just came out. Whose cybersecurity we recently learned was left so unprotected that its update server's password was literally SolarWinds123. So nefariously hacked by the Russians, but also, why was it left so unprotected? But what about the perhaps more insidious Russian efforts at disinformation, which have helped to reshape the information environment worldwide, Zakaria asks. He then does a few mental gymnastics to tie Russia's propaganda campaign to Donald Trump, because of course he does, and leaves the reader with the closing line, the problem is not just that Russia has hacked America's computer systems, it seems to have hacked our minds. This is from a tweet from Ali Abunama. Nothing to see here, it's the West, it's perfectly normal and not at all compromising for a news agency like Reuters to employ a CIA agent to ensure the company can meet the disparate needs of the U.S. government. This is true, right? So Reuters employs a CIA agent. Don Scalise joined Thomson Reuters in July 2015 to serve as the company's first government global business director. She is charged with the responsibility of advancing Thomson Reuters' ability to meet the disparate needs of the U.S. government, working across the company's major business lines and optimally leveraging its vast and unique data, products, and services. Let's read on. In this capacity, she developed strategic relationships with the government sector constituents and key decision makers, develops campaigns to promote Thomson Reuters business growth, and works with the company's senior executives to determine relevant strategic goals and plans. Prior to joining Thomson Reuters, Ms. Scalise served 33 years with the Central Intelligence Agency. Dong, dong, dong. In her last federal assignment, she served as the National Intelligence Manager for the Western Hemisphere within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or the ODNI. In this role, she was responsible for overseeing national intelligence for an area of responsibility spanning from the Arctic to the tip of South America, including the U.S. homeland. All right. The Washington Post keeps hammering this narrative about powerful Russian mind hackers as though Russia is the only nation with an existing propaganda campaign on the world stage and not one of the weaker ones doing so, right? The U.S. government itself openly uses propaganda on foreigners with programs like Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, and Voice of America, which actually serves the more important function of presenting the illusion that those are the only form of U.S. government propaganda. In reality, the plutocratic class, which owns the mass media, works closely with the U.S. government and sets up its institutions to only elevate voices which advance narratives that are favorable to the status quo those plutocrats have built their kingdoms upon. Washington Post itself is owned by the richest man in the world, who is also a CIA contractor. Did you all know that? Did you know that? And sits on a Pentagon advisory board. Yes, Jeff Bezos actually owns the Washington Post, and they are contracted with the CIA for web cloud services. The unofficial propaganda operations of the oligarchic empire give it a massive edge in international narrative control that dwarfs both official U.S. propaganda programs and anything the Russian government could ever come up with. Among some very stiff competition, one of the dumbest reoccurring themes in Western imperialist media is that the idea that world affairs, entire electoral and government systems, and even our very minds are being controlled by a nation with the same GDP as South Korea. True story. Russia does not have an especially strong sway over the world stage. It just happens to be one of the few remaining power structures which have resisted absorption into the U.S. centralized empire and is being targeted with a propaganda campaign aimed at changing that. Russia is not hacking your mind. If anyone is hacking your mind, it's the vast globe-spanning power structure loosely centralized around the United States, which has been aggressively propagandizing you into supporting the continuation of status quo politics since you were born. Ding, ding, ding. If you are repeating this narrative, you are the useful idiot of the CIA. I'm just going to let you know that. Sorry to tell you that. If you think this is all true and Russia's coming for us and they hacked our elections and blah, 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 you are just not a very smart person because you had your mind hacked by the CIA. The dawn of political insight comes when you realize that propaganda is not just something that is done by other nations to other people. It's done by your own rulers in your own nation, and it is being done to you. Thank you, Caitlin Johnson, for that amazing bit of work, and that's really all you need to know about every single Russia story that comes out on CNN or MSNBC. Russia's paying bounties bounties on the head of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. Russia's hacking our elections. There's just been a major hack, a Russian hack. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Here they come. Here come the terrorists. Here comes Russia. Here comes all the bad people. Oh, here come all the bad people who have had their minds hacked by Russia, right? So you really gotta get yourself outside of this whole narrative in order to see what's actually going on. And look, you really got to get outside of it and see what's going on. If you feel like I've dinged you because I called you stupid, I apologize. But hey, don't fall for the okey doke. It's really very easy to fall for the okey doke. Right? If you believe this story or have believed this story in the past, it's cool. It's cool to say like, yeah, not so much anymore, right? Don't take my word for it. There are many other people talking about this, right? It's not just me that's talking about this. Caitlin Johnson is an exceptional journalist who's been talking about this for quite a while. Other people are talking about this as well. Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal, Jimmy Dore, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Jamal Thomas, Nico House. Many great journalists are talking about the ridiculousness of this narrative that has been going on for 4 years. Anyways, the dude says, excellent, Caitlin Johnson. Yes, she's so great. Judy Truitt, I like Caitlin. I read her stuff on my FB page. I share, but I don't think others are fond of her point of view. Right. Well, because, yeah, if you don't like her point of view, you might think, that you might actually be a person that believes all those stories. So the point, the line is like, do I believe what the mainstream media is telling me is the truth, or do I question it? And if you question it, then you put yourself, on the side of, am I one of those people? Yes, you're one of those people. It's okay. Come over to the side of the light, not the dark side, the light side. They're on the dark side. Anyways, Kiro Hikes, oh my God, it's not Russia that's playing with our minds, it's capitalist narrow AI. It's a great article, right? Schultze 100, probably people hiding in your backyard right now, waiting to hit you with their brainwave perception guns. Right. Yeah, realize watching Soviet media and American media very similar. But here's the thing, though, is like RT. RT is just capable of giving a more realistic spin on what's actually happening in American politics. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not. It's like why some progressives go on Fox News to talk to the country, and why some people think that's really terrible. The reason why is because Fox News is a bunch of right-wing propaganda, but they are able to better critique the left, right, than the left can critique themselves, right? So a lot of progressives like Glenn Greenwald or Tulsi Gabbard or Jimmy Dore, they go on Fox News because they are allowed to critique the left on Fox News, where CNN and NBC won't let any of those people on their channel, right? Because they're all about their own propaganda, the left-wing propaganda. So the same goes with RT. Of course, Soviets do their own propaganda. Of course they do. Of course they propagandize their own people. Of course they do. But the United States is propagandizing its own people, right? So if RT just allows a better space for being able to accurately critique American propaganda. That's all I'm saying. And it's very hard to discern what's real and what's not real. It takes a lot of work. It actually takes a lot of work and a lot of awareness. And right, Soviet Union died a long time ago. When we say the word Soviet media doesn't exist anymore. We're just talking about Russian media. Soviet Union does not exist. Realize a good quote from Noam Chomsky: propaganda is to the democracy what the bludgeon is to the totalitarian state. Right. Very good quote. Right. Ed Ryan, RT Russia can take an outside view. Exactly. Lee Camp is on RT. Yeah, I love Lee Camp. One of my favorites. The foreign agent from Richmond, Virginia. Right. Chris Hedges is also on RT, right? Gotta love Chris Hedges. Why is he allowed on RT? Because he critiques the power structure of the United States. That's why. He's not able to do that anywhere else. So, realize RT is our best media beyond any doubt. Right. Irk 1, critique America and you're a Russian agent. Oh, let me finish this up. Hold on, Irk 1. Irk 1, you left a really good comment yesterday. I'm going to actually finish up with this comment from Irk 1. Irk 1 was talking about Biden being a cure for TDS or a placebo for curing a cancer culture or setting a broken bone. Irk 1 is saying, we want cancer culture to stop. And maybe those at the top do too, but they don't want to destroy the precious cancer cells they work so hard to create. Exactly. A wealth of cancer. We are confronted with the difficult task of procuring the energy to feed ever-growing cities, humans, and machines while using less of it. Emissions were way down this year. Maybe birth rates will follow and consumption rates of goods. Maybe only essential items will be brought to you by GM and Amazon. We need a different culture. In effect, that just happened. We are all living in a much different culture than we were a year ago, except for those indigenous cultures with jungle buffers and those already so dispossessed. Regardless of its origins, the virus has shut things down in ways that may be permanent. A culture of the oikos is needed, rather many cultures of the oikos. Good comment by Irk 1. Thank you so much, you guys, for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. I appreciate you all joining me in the chats every single day. And thank you all for joining me on Rockfin. You guys are awesome. Urban Hermit, Osama number 5, Poppy Davis, Kevin Shanholzer. Thanks for commenting, chilling out with me, etc. I will be back tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow at the regular time of 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You're welcome, Irk 1. You're welcome. Until next time, peace.